had been rescued off the coast of Dover. Sky News has exclusive pictures of that. Now, we don't often hear a lot about female pilots, sadly. They are still rare in the industry. One pioneering woman's story, though, is the subject of a new musical. The show looks at the career of Beverley Bass, American Airlines' first female pilot captain, who was forced to land her plane in the tiny Canadian town of Gander on the day of the September 11th attacks. Let's take a quick look at the show.
The first female American captain in history. Suddenly I'm in the cockpit. Suddenly I've got my ring. Suddenly those pilots protesting me. Well, they can get their own drinks. Come on.
Well, the show looks at how the residents of Gander looked after their unexpected visitors, but it also tells the true story of Bass's historic career as a trailblazer for female pilots. Beverley Bass is with us, along with British Airways pilot Helen Geary. I'm delighted that I've got two female pilots in the studio. We've almost got a quorum, haven't we? Hello, ladies. Lovely to see you.
Thank you.
Tell us about 9/11. What happened?
Oh gosh, it was a beautiful day. I was
The weather
scheduled.
was gorgeous, wasn't it?
It was gorgeous. We were flying from Paris to Dallas, and we were right over the middle of the North Atlantic when we got word on our air-to-air frequencies that one of the World Trade Centers had been hit by an airplane. And of course, like so many people, we just thought it was a small airplane. And not that that is terrible, but it never entered our minds that it was an airliner. And then about 20 minutes later, we heard that the second tower had been hit, and with that came the word terrorism. So that was really the moment that our lives changed quite a bit.
And then what happened?
Well, we proceeded westbound, and the next thing that came across the radios was that New York's airspace was going to be closed, which really didn't affect us, for our routing over northern Canada down through Chicago and into Dallas. But then when they said all of the U.S. airspace was going to be closed, that meant we were going to divert. So I started programming the computers for Toronto, Montreal, Edmonton, Calgary, just one of the major cities. And I had enough fuel to go anywhere. So the next thing we heard from the air-to-air frequency from the other pilots was that once we reached 50 degrees west longitude, which is where we actually come in contact with Gander Control, that we would get orders as to where we would land. And as you know, we don't get orders as airline pilots. It's always something that we coordinate with our dispatchers when we're going to divert an airplane. So we were ordered to land immediately in Gander.
Listening to these sort of stories, I'm guessing you weren't even a pilot at that time.
No, I was doing some training at that time. I remember it very well, though. I was planning to do a navigational sortie when we heard the news.
Changed everything, didn't it?
It really did.
For aviation. It completely did. Talk to me about when you landed. I'm going to come back to you and talk to you about being in the cockpit shortly, but I just wanted, for people who are watching at home, to give them an idea of just how challenging it was. I've been to Gander. It's tiny. It's a tiny little place.
It is.
And yet something like, 8,000 people were there for one night?
They had a population of 9,400 people.
Yeah.
We landed 38 jets, all wide bodies, in 3 hours, and we were nearly 7,000 passengers and crew members. And we invaded their tiny town.
And the reason that you could is because this was a particular runway, wasn't it? That was for refueling for military jets.
Actually, the U.S. built the airport. It was for World War II, and it was for the airplanes to be able to refuel on their way to Europe. So the runways are actually great. And we use the airport as an en route alternate for all of our crossings over the North Atlantic. Although most airline pilots will fly their whole career without ever landing in Gander. I have landed 3 times.
Always for emergency reasons?
Yes.
Okay, don't tell that to one of us flyers, all I can say.
Well, no, the other 2 were medical. So
Oh, okay.
it wasn't anything to do with the airplane ever.
She added quickly.
Yes.
Great to have a female captain, and having been at the controls for years. I want to say decades. I hope that's okay if I say that.
Absolutely. You can add many decades.
Oh, okay. But we don't have enough women in the cockpit. Why is that?
Well, historically, really, there haven't been.
Looking at pictures of you, actually, while we're talking.
There haven't been many women pilots because really there's not the exposure, I don't think, to young girls. I mean, young boys by the age of 6 to 12, it's like the second most aspired to be career for young boys, but 0 girls. I don't remember seeing any sort of female pilots when I was younger, and I'm not sure many people can say that they've actually flown on an aircraft with female pilots, so it really is a shame that the exposure hasn't been there, but it is a fantastic career for anybody, females, males, and I'd highly recommend it to any young girl interested in it to pursue and
So why
find out
did you choose
more.
to be a pilot?
Well, I loved going on aeroplanes when I was younger. The best part of going on holiday, if we went on a plane, was the plane. You know, I loved it, and then it wasn't until I went to university actually that I did my first flying lesson, and from then I was hooked. And I then pursued this career and worked hard, and eventually started flying in 2007. So it's been a whirlwind. I've worked very, very hard, but the industry is fantastic, and I love
It's
it.
very expensive, though, isn't it, to qualify as a pilot?
It can be, but there are bursaries out there, and that you can apply to help get funding with that, and pilot programs and things like that. So. But yes, the dedication is really mainly from your ambition and wanting to do it. And if you want to do it, you can do it and you'll get there.
Why did you want to be a pilot then?
Our stories almost mimic each other.
Yeah.
We don't come from a flying family. I was obsessed with airplanes from the time I was 8 years old. All I wanted to do was go to the airport and watch them take off and land. And when I went to college, I wanted to go so far away that I had to go on an airplane. That was very important to me. So I was raised in South Florida, and I went to college in Texas because I wanted to fly home from college on all my trips. And it is expensive. There are many more avenues available today than there used to be. And I think a lot of women think that it's not a good career, especially if you want to be a mom. But in reality, it is a great career as a mother. I have 2 kids. Now, I did have them a little late in life. I was 40, but I had a lot of seniority with the airlines. So, I flew 9 days a month. I flew 3 on, 7 off. I was home more with my kids than any working mother. But sadly, our percentage in the United States, and I'm not sure about for over here, we are still only at 5%.
Yeah. Well, I think the industry average is, right in saying, 3%, although
Around
your
about 3%.
employer is a little bit higher than
British
that.
Airways has double the national average, which we're very, very proud of. And actually we welcomed 22 new female pilots last year, and we're hoping for more this year. And we have a big event coming up actually to celebrate Women's Day, International Women's Day, where we are inviting 100 young girls between 13 and 18 to our Global Learning Academy, where they'll get to experience a day in the life as a pilot, because we're celebrating our 100 years. So 100 girls are coming in, and they're going to get to see our flight simulators, they're going to get to do walk arounds on the aircraft, use the slides, there's going to be talks from pilots. So we really want to inspire that future generation in that age group to show them what they can do. And
It's not that women haven't been, at the forefront of flying aeroplanes for a long time. Amy Johnson, of course, 90 years ago, almost 90 years ago, she flew from London down to Darwin, I think, in Australia. And she was, again, she wasn't part of a flying background. Her father, I think, was a fishmonger or something. But that's 90 years ago. And still, we haven't necessarily, as women, caught on. Have a look at some of these tweets that we've had today, ladies, and it'd be interesting to see what your thoughts are on that. On this first one, can we look them in the wall, and then the ladies can see it at the same time? I've trained many women to fly military fast jets. In general, they do just fine, but they are not as interested in vertical ambition. Rising to the top, they prefer relationships to things. But as pilots, they are just as good as the guys and better in some areas. For me, Tim, that is everyday sexism. I'm not asking you to comment, ladies. I'm asking you to look at this next week. I'll speak on your behalf if I may. First Officer Elliot, I think he may be one of yours. First flying instructor was a woman, and fantastic. The industry desperately needs a more diverse workforce. Also, the casual sexism of some parking and directions comments on this is disheartening. Have you encountered that?
Once or twice. It is mainly just in jest, though, and actually most of the time people are more surprised to see rather than disappointed or want to take the mickey out of us. Yeah, it is one of surprise, but I'm always happy to talk to our customers, and they're always super interested to see that it is a female, especially when there's two of us or even three of us in some cases.
And you fly long haul?
I do.
Oh, okay. Have you encountered sexism in the United States?
Oh, very little, very little. And I think a lot of other female pilots might disagree with me, but I was treated with so much respect. And when young girls today come up to me and say, how do you make it in a male-dominated field? And I always respond by saying, if you are great at your job and you maintain respect, you've already crossed so many hurdles, It's very hard for them to criticize you when you do a great job and they respect you. So I really had a wonderful 32-year career at American.
My goodness.
It would be hard for me to come up with maybe one or two negative stories, but in 32 years, that's not many.
But let's have a look at some more tweets, if you'll indulge me, ladies. Tangent to reality, whatever. Regarding fighter pilots, probably the fact that women as a population tend to have slower reaction times than men. However, in civil aviation, reaction times are not crucial, so probably not a detriment. I'm not sure that determined, forgive me. More likely to be social factors. So apparently your reaction times are not as good, Helen.
Apparently not.
I don't think we ever knew that.
I beg to disagree.
As we saw, when you had to land your plane very quickly in Gander, you pretty quick reaction times there.
Actually, I have heard the complete opposite, that women process differently when there is an emergency, and we also have the innate ability as moms to multitask. We can cook dinner and feed a baby and polish our nails all at the same time. Men can't do that. So they often credit us by saying, we process so well in the cockpit when the situation becomes abnormal. It's one thing to fly a normal trip across the Atlantic or across the Pacific, and things are generally pretty mundane. But, on 9/11, of course, things changed very rapidly for us.
Well, let's continue on with our recruitment drive and get rid of some of these taboos. John Boniface, probably because of the incredibly high cost of training for a commercial license, but you were telling us that that's not necessarily the case.
There are certainly, I think, for women, I know there are some bursaries that are offered by the British Women Pilots Association, for example, but there's certainly lots of things you can research to help. There perhaps some others out there that I'm not aware of. But yes, it can be expensive.
What are we talking expense-wise?
It depends on how you do it. So you can go to integrated schools where you'll start on day one and come out with a licence at the end. Now that's a more expensive way of doing it, but you can do it bit by bit as well. So there are many pilots who will integrate working with getting their licence bit by bit. I'm not sure if it's the same in America, but you can do your private pilot's licence, then work for a little bit longer, build up some hours, take some time out, go do your commercial pilot's licence, take some time out, keep working at the same time. There's many ways of doing it. It might take a little bit longer, but at the end you get the same licence and you're still as employable now as someone who's been on the integrated course. So there are many options open there to finance it however you wish.
Is that what you recognise in your...
She's exactly right. In the States, we say it costs about $50,000 to get your license to be able to be an instructor. And that's what happens a lot of times is you become associated with a flight school and you get all of your ratings, and one of your last ones is your instructor license, and then they will often hire you to teach for them. And you don't make a lot of money as an instructor, but the great thing is that you are building flight hours. And, that's what the airlines want, is hours in your logbook. And you're not having to pay. Somebody is paying you to fly the airplane.
Okay, so that's a good
And, of course, now, today, which wasn't available in my era, is women can be in the military. They can be in a guard unit, they can be in the reserves, they can make a full-time job out of it, and the airlines love to hire military pilots. So there are many options that, you know, in the early 70s weren't there for us.
Okay, one more. Let's have a quick look. Who is this? This is Gary Hopkins. How many women actually apply and train to be a pilot? Do they compete in any tests? Why do we never have any news headlines when men or white men are underrepresented like receptionist roles? Oh, Gary, please. Let's take the beginning of that tweet. Should we have many women actually apply and train to be a pilot? I suppose he's got a point there, Helen.
I don't know how many women apply, how many men apply, how many people apply. You know, it's a collective career. So I imagine that there are lots of people who aspire to it, whether they're male or female. So the actual number, I don't know, but our job, certainly in British Airways, is to try and get that number higher from the females.
Okay. Talk to me a bit more about your play, or your musical, if you will. Tell me how it came about.
Oh my gosh, it is the best story. On the 10th anniversary of 9/11, I got a phone call from an Austrian film crew asking me if I was going back to Gander for the anniversary. I didn't know anything was going on in Gander, but I said, well, you know, let me talk to my husband. So we decided to go back, and I thought we were just going back for me to show him the Comfort Inn where I stayed for 5 days. I thought that's all we were going to do. Little did I know that there was one beautiful event after the next planned to, you can't celebrate 9/11, but they honor 9/11 in a very different way than we do in the United States. And, you know, for them, it was all about the good things that occurred for us during that time while our country was suffering through such a horrific tragedy. So I did a lot of interviews for the news people that were looking for 5-second sound bites. And somebody said that there were 2 playwrights in town, and they had actually been given a grant by Sharon College in Toronto. It was Michael Rubinoff who thought of the idea.
Because you don't think you'll make a musical out of 9/11, really, do you? Let's be honest.
Not at all. And he knew about what had occurred in Gander, and he had approached several playwrights about not only writing a story, but doing a musical. And most of them said, not touching that with a 10-foot pole. Mm-hmm. But these 2 young playwrights had one other play, a successful one, under their belt, and they agreed to accept the grant to go to Gander for 1 month to see if there was a story to be told. And they interviewed as many people as they could. The only reason I was interviewed is I was the only returning pilot on the 10th anniversary. You know, because the pilots from Europe, I mean, they had no reason to go back to Gander. And I guess it helped their story that I was a female pilot, and it probably add a little bit of icing to the cake.